In the year 2042, the small town of Pine Brook, nestled in the humid lowlands of southern Louisiana, was buzzing with excitement and trepidation. Rumors had spread that a new species of bat, the Desmodus rotundus, had been sighted in the nearby bayous. These weren't just any bats, they were known as ordinary vampires, infamous for their bloodthirsty nature and their penchant for spreading rabies. Originally from Central and South America, these creatures had begun migrating northward, lured by the changing climate. Drive. Eleanor Hayes, a biologist from Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University, had been studying these bats for years. She arrived in Pine Brook with a team of researchers, determined to understand the implications of their arrival. The townspeople, however, were less than thrilled. Whispers of ancient curses and vampire legends surfaced, blending folklore with the real threat these bats posed. One humid evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the dense cypress swamps, Dr. Hayes and her team set up camp. They were equipped with the latest technology: infrared cameras, sonar detectors, and tranquilizer guns. Their goal was to capture a few of these bats for study, but as the night wore on, the forest grew eerily silent. Suddenly, the sonar detectors went wild. Dozens of bats swarmed the area, their leathery wings creating a cacophony of unsettling sounds. Drive. Hayes, peering through her night vision goggles, felt a chill run down her spine. These bats were larger than she had anticipated, their eyes glowing with an unnatural intelligence. "Everyone, stay calm and stick together," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. But the words had barely left her mouth when a piercing scream shattered the night. One of her team members, a young researcher named Kyle, had been dragged into the darkness by an unseen force. The team scattered, panicked and disoriented. Drive. Hayes struggled to maintain her composure, her heart pounding in her chest. She managed to rally a few of the remaining researchers, and together, they pursued the source of the scream. They found Kyle near the edge of the swamp, unconscious and pale, to puncture wounds on his neck. Blood dripped slowly from the wounds, pooling in the damp earth. Drive. Hayes knew they had to act fast. If Kyle had been bitten by a rabid bat, they had limited time to get him medical help. As they lifted Kyle onto a makeshift stretcher, the forest seemed to come alive with the sound of wings. The bats were circling above, their numbers increasing. One of the researchers, a seasoned biologist named Dr. Alvarez, raised his tranquilizer gun, but before he could fire, a bat swooped down, knocking the gun from his hands. Drive. Hayes looked up, her eyes meeting the gaze of one of the bats. It hovered there, suspended in the air, its eyes burning with a malevolent hunger. She realized with a sinking feeling that these bats were not merely animals, they were something much more sinister, something that defied scientific explanation. "Back to camp, now," she yelled, her voice cutting through the chaos. The team hurried back, but as they did, they noticed something horrifying. The bats were not just attacking randomly, they were hurting the researchers, driving them deeper into the swamp. As the moon rose high in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the landscape, Dr. Hayes and her team found themselves cornered, surrounded by the bloodthirsty creatures. The air was thick with tension and the scent of fear. And then, from the shadows, emerged a figure cloaked in darkness. Taller than any human, with eyes that gleamed like the bats, it moved with a predatory grace. The ordinary vampires, once thought to be mere animals, had amassed a creature born of legend and nightmare. Drive. Hayes took a step back, her mind racing. The figure smiled, revealing sharp, glistening fangs. "Welcome to my domain," it hissed, its voice a low, guttural growl. "You have come seeking the truth, and now you shall find it." The last thing Dr. Hayes saw before darkness consumed her was the swarm of bats descending, their eyes filled with an unquenchable thirst for blood. The townspeople of Pine Brook would soon learn the true meaning of fear, for the vampires had come, and they were here to stay. Drive. Eleanor Hayes awoke with a start, her body aching and her vision blurred. She found herself in a dimly lit cavern, the walls slick with moisture. The air was thick with the scent of earth and decay. As her eyes adjusted to the gloom, she saw her team scattered around her, all unconscious but seemingly unharmed. A low, sinister chuckle echoed through the cavern. Drive. Hayes turned her head and saw the figure from before the master of the bats standing at the far end of the chamber. It moved forward with an eerie grace, its eyes locked onto hers. "You're awake," it said, its voice a silken whisper that sent chills down her spine. Good. I prefer my guests conscious. Who? What are you? Doctor. Hayes managed to stammer, struggling to sit up. The figure smiled, revealing those sharp, predatory fangs once more. I am Alistair, the first and the last of my kind. I was born centuries ago, when the line between human and beast was blurred by dark magic. These bats, he gestured to the swarm hanging from the cavern's ceiling, are my progeny, my eyes and ears in the world. Doctor. Hayes's mind raced. She had come here to study the bats, but now she was faced with a creature of legend, something that shouldn't exist. What do you want from us? Alistair's smile widened. Knowledge, Dr. Hayes. I have watched humanity for centuries, adapting and evolving, but always in the shadows. Your kind has grown so clever, so advanced. I want to understand your science, your technology, and in return, I will grant you the secrets of the ages. Secrets, Doctor. Hayes echoed, a mix of fear and curiosity in her voice. Immortality, Alistair said softly. Power beyond your wildest dreams. But there is a price, of course. Before Dr. Hayes could respond, the cavern was filled with the sound of flapping wings. The bats, hundreds of them, descended from the ceiling and surrounded the team, their eyes glowing in the darkness. Alistair raised a hand, and the bats stilled, their attention focused on him. You see, Dr. Hayes, Alistair continued, I need allies. Your world is changing, and soon, my kind will be hunted, eradicated by your ever-advancing technologies. But with your help, we can coexist. We can thrive. Dr. Hayes felt a cold sweat trickle down her spine. She knew she was standing at a crossroads, with the fate of her team and perhaps humanity hanging in the balance. Could she trust this creature? Could she afford not to? As if reading her thoughts, Alistair leaned in closer, his eyes boring into hers. Think carefully, Dr. Hayes. The choice you make tonight will shape the future, for better or for worse. At that moment, a groan came from nearby. Kyle was waking up, his eyes fluttering open. He looked around in confusion, then his gaze settled on Alistair and widened in horror. We don't have much time, Alistair warned. Decide, Dr. Hayes. Join me, and unlock the secrets of the universe, or refuse, and face the wrath of my children. Dr. Hayes's heart pounded in her chest. She knew she had to choose, and quickly. The weight of the decision pressed down on her, and the eyes of the bats watched her every move. Just as she opened her mouth to speak, a sudden burst of light flooded the cavern. The bats screeched and scattered, and Alistair hissed in pain, retreating into the shadows. Drive. Hayes shielded her eyes, struggling to see the source of the light. A voice, strong and authoritative, called out from the entrance of the cavern. Eleanor, over here. She recognized the voice. It was Dr. Alvarez, holding a powerful flashlight and a weapon. He had somehow evaded capture and was now their only hope. Eleanor, we need to get out of here, now. Dr. Alvarez shouted, his eyes darting nervously around the cavern. Drive. Hayes scrambled to her feet, helping Kyle up. We have to move, she urged, glancing back at the shadows where Alistair had disappeared. As they made their way towards the light and safety, Dr. Hayes couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. Alistair's words echoed in her mind, a chilling reminder of the choice she had yet to make. They emerged into the cool night air, the sounds of the swamp oddly comforting after the oppressive atmosphere of the cavern. But even as they caught their breath, Dr. Hayes knew that the real challenge was just beginning. Alistair and his brood were out there, watching, waiting, and the question remained, would she ally with the ancient predator or find a way to fight back? The fate of Pinebrook, and perhaps the world, hung in the balance. Drive. Eleanor Hayes and her team barely had time to catch their breath before the gravity of their situation set in. They were alive, but Alistair's chilling offer and the existence of his vampiric progeny loomed over them like a dark cloud. Drive. Alvarez's flashlight flickered, casting long shadows across the twisted roots and hanging moss of the bayou. That thing, Kyle murmured, still pale and weak. What was it? A vampire, Dr. Hayes replied quietly, her mind racing with 1,000 questions. A real, living vampire. Dr. Alvarez nodded, his expression grim. We need to get back to the lab and contact the authorities. This goes beyond our research. This is a threat to everyone. They hurried back to their campsite, packing up their equipment as quickly as possible. As they worked, the night seemed to close in around them, the rustling of leaves and distant animal calls taking on a more sinister tone. Every shadow seemed to hide a pair of glowing eyes. Every gust of wind carried an echo of Alistair's chilling voice. Back at the lab, Dr. Hayes and her team began their analysis. They had collected enough data to confirm the bat's presence and their connection to Alistair, but the bigger questions remained unanswered. Who or what was Alistair? How many other vampires were there? And most importantly, how could they stop them? Days turned into weeks, and the team worked tirelessly. Drive. Hayes delved into old legends and obscure texts, searching for any clue that might help them understand their adversary. Meanwhile, Dr. Alvarez focused on developing a plan to defend the town and, if necessary, fight back. One evening, as they were deep in discussion, a knock on the lab door startled them. It was Sheriff Mason, his usually calm demeanor replaced by a look of urgent concern. Dr. Hayes, Dr. Alvarez, he said, we've had reports of strange sightings in the woods. People are disappearing. We need your help. Dr. Hayes exchanged a glance with Dr. Alvarez. The time for research was over. They had to act. The town was on edge, the once lively streets now eerily quiet. The townspeople had heard the rumors, and fear was spreading like wildfire. Drive. Hayes and her team gathered in the town hall, presenting their findings and laying out a plan. We need to protect ourselves, Dr. Hayes said, her voice steady. Alistair and his bats are dangerous, but we have the means to fight back. We'll use UV lights to drive them away, and we'll fortify the town's defenses. But that's not enough, Dr. Alvarez interjected. We need to find Alistair's lair and put an end to this. If we can capture him, maybe we can find a way to stop the spread of these vampires for good. As they spoke, an unsettling realization dawned on Dr. Hayes. Alistair had mentioned a choice, an offer of knowledge and power. What if his interest in them wasn't just predatory? What if he saw them as potential allies or worse, as threats to be eliminated? That night, as the town braced itself for another attack, Dr. Hayes couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She peered out into the darkness, her thoughts racing. Alistair was out there, somewhere, waiting for her decision. Suddenly, a scream pierced the night. Drive. Hayes and Dr. Alvarez rushed outside, their hearts pounding. The town square was in chaos, townspeople running in all directions as shadows swooped down from the sky. In the midst of the chaos, Dr. Hayes saw him, Alistair, standing calmly amidst the turmoil, his eyes fixed on her. He raised a hand, and the bats retreated, leaving a circle of silence around him. You cannot fight what you do not understand, he called out, his voice carrying through the night. Join me, Dr. Hayes. Together, we can achieve greatness. Or continue this futile struggle and face the consequences. Dr. Hayes felt a surge of defiance, but also a nagging doubt. Alistair's offer was tempting, and his power undeniable. What choice did they really have? Before she could respond, Alistair turned and disappeared into the darkness, leaving the town shaken but intact. The attacks had stopped for now, but the threat remained. Drive. Hayes knew that the next move was hers. She had to decide, join forces with Alistair and potentially unlock the secrets of immortality, or stand her ground and find a way to defeat him, even if it meant risking everything. The fate of Pinebrook, and perhaps the world, hung in the balance, and time was running out. The next morning, as the first light of dawn pierced the dense canopy of the swamp, Dr. Eleanor Hayes gathered her team in the town hall. The air was thick with tension, but there was also a spark of hope. They had faced the darkness and survived, and now it was time to take action. Last night, Alistair made his intentions clear. Dr. Hayes began, her voice strong and resolute. We have two choices. We can join him, or we can find a way to stop him. I believe there's a third option. We can use his knowledge against him. Dr. Alvarez nodded, stepping forward with a determined look. We've analyzed the data and found a way to enhance our UV lights. These lights can weaken the bats and even harm Alistair. But to truly end this, we need to find his lair and confront him directly. The townspeople, though fearful, rallied around the scientists. They helped fortify the town with UV lights and prepared makeshift weapons infused with garlic and silver, old folklore defenses that might just work. As night fell, the town was ready. Drive. Hayes led a small, brave group into the swamp, following the faint trail they had mapped out from previous sightings. The forest seemed to close in around them, every rustle and shadow putting them on edge. Hours passed, and just when despair began to creep in, they found it a hidden cave, its entrance almost completely obscured by vines and underbrush. The air inside was cold and damp, a palpable sense of malevolence hanging in the air. With a nod from Dr. Hayes, the team moved in, their UV lights cutting through the darkness. The cavern was vast, its walls lined with bats. In the center, on a stone dais, stood Alistair, his eyes glowing with a mix of anger and admiration. "You are persistent, Dr. Hayes," Alistair said, his voice echoing off the walls. "But you are too late. My power is beyond your comprehension." Dr. Hayes stepped forward, her UV light trained on him. "Maybe so, but we're not powerless. This ends tonight, Alistair." With a roar, Alistair lunged, but the team was ready. The enhanced UV lights flared to life, their intense beams hitting him squarely. Alistair shrieked, his form flickering as if caught between two worlds. The bats swarmed, but the townspeople fought bravely, driving them back with their improvised weapons. "Drive." Hayes pushed forward, focusing her light on Alistair with all her might. "You want to understand humanity, Alistair. Understand this. We don't give up." With a final, agonized scream, Alistair's form disintegrated, leaving nothing but a pile of ash. The bats, now leaderless, fled into the night, their hold over the town broken. The team emerged from the cave, battered but victorious. The first light of dawn was breaking, casting a warm glow over the swamp. The townspeople cheered as the heroes returned, their spirits lifted by the promise of a new beginning. In the days that followed, Pine Brook began to heal. The threat of the vampires had united the town, and together, they worked to rebuild and strengthen their community. Drive. Hayes and her team continued their research, but now with a renewed sense of purpose and hope. As for Dr. Hayes, she often thought of Alistair and his offer. She had chosen humanity over power, and in doing so, had discovered the true strength that lay within herself and her community. And so, under the watchful eyes of the townspeople and the resilient spirit of Pine Brook, the darkness was banished, and the light prevailed, ensuring that the town and the world would remain safe from the shadows of the night.